before, to be fair. So
yes,
I'm conscious that we want to be able to release you guys in good time. So fine. So we'll crack on. So hello, welcome everybody. Laura, I know I can't see you, but I'm going to make the assumption that you are there and that you can hear me nice and clearly. Is that okay?
I can indeed.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, so little tiny bit of context is that through the process of neighbourhood planning, the community of the Jewellery Quarter have taken matters into their own hands to try and take some control over design and just the development side. And when I say development, I don't mean physical development, I just mean how we develop our area and how we want to protect it. Tonight's specific topic is that sort of protection around the jewellery and the creative industries. Matt's going to go through it in more detail in a moment, but ultimately it was the community getting together and saying, do you know what, this is a very unique area. We want to protect it. We want to help develop it. We want to make this an area that people specifically journey to and stay within. But we have to remain mindful of the fact that we are built on a long history of creativity. And whilst we may have some up-to-date creativity in terms of digital, we also have some more historic creativity around the jewellery industry and also the designer maker. So actually, Tina, you being here is wonderful because you are a designer maker, but you are not a jeweller. So it's helpful for everybody to be appreciative of the breadth of creativity in our area. So I will hand over to Matt, but just to say that we really are in the final throes of a 7-year process. It doesn't have to be 7 years, we're just perfectionists. And so we are just at the end of Regulation 14, and we are going to wrap that up actually at the end of this week. So this is your final chance really to submit questions and ask more things around the creative side of the plan. So without further ado, I shall hand over to Matthew, who is going to, I believe, share some slides and just talk through some of the specifics. And then when we've been through that, we will start to open up for some questions, some of which we have had submitted in advance. So Matthew, over to you.
Magic, thanks Nick. Just bear with me whilst I share my screen. And hello everyone. Right. Can you see a nice, pretty slide?
Yes. Perfect.
Excellent. So as Nicholas says, I'm going to just run you through a few bits of introduction to the neighbourhood plan as its whole, but pick out a bit of focus on the creative industries. If you tuned into the jewellery and creative industry first session, which was a daytime session, we took you through a lot of the policy stuff that is aimed at delivering for the needs of the jewellery and creative industries. I urge you to watch that again to give you a bit more context, but we can answer any general or specific questions a bit later. But it's worth it both for the benefit of the recording and for the audience here, just to really take a step back and look at what the neighbourhood plan's trying to do. And the vision, as you can see at the top, is set out. And I've highlighted in red really the bits that are most relevant to the creative industry. And jewellery industry under government classification, the design and manufacturing of jewellery forms part of the wider creative industry. So here on in, I'll just refer to creative industry because many of its needs are the same, particularly in the Jewellery Quarter. So really, the highlights are a successful community of businesses and residents, and jewellery and designing and making of all sorts at its heart. The creative approach to conservation is underlined because this isn't just about conserving old buildings. It's also about conserving and securing the future of our creative industries, which give the jewellery quarter its vitality, and the neighbourhood plan wants to further stimulate the vitality of that area. So there's 4 goals set out there, which really deliver on that vision, and then underlining at the bottom is the simple fact that the neighbourhood plan has been written by the jewellery quarter community of businesses and residents. It's not something done by the council or any other organisation to the jewellery quarter. It's by the jewellery quarter and for the jewellery quarter. So for those that have either accessed the documents or haven't had a chance to look at the documents and want an introduction, the neighbourhood plan, there's 2 versions of it available. One is a very long document which gives lots of context, and it also has lots of kind of planning language in it. It's very very kind of legalese and some there's also the plain English version of the neighbourhood plan, which is much easier to follow, but both of them are split down into these 4 sections, and the 4 sections are supporting and protecting the jewellery and creative industries, the jewellery quarter as a whole, as a mixed-use quarter with creativity at its heart. Then moving around the jewellery quarter is the 3rd part, and then the 4th bit is the jewellery quarter environment, which is what we see, smell and feel. And before we open the discussion out, as part of our research involving creative businesses, surveying creative businesses, there are a number of issues that have been flagged up, which have been common challenges for those businesses. Now, there's about 10 there, and you can see that some are in grey and some are in green. The ones that are green are things that a planning document can directly influence, whereas the ones in grey, such as skills and an ageing workforce, Birmingham Property Services choosing to sell some of its building stock, competition from abroad, these aren't directly planning issues. However, a neighbourhood plan can have some influence on these. And what we see here is that the 4 sections of the neighbourhood plan do deliver between them, either directly or indirectly, on achieving or resolving or helping to resolve some of these challenges. So, for example, the 3rd one, moving around the jewellery quarter, could also be called destination jewellery quarter. And so, whilst competition from abroad is not a planning issue, actually creating the jewellery quarter as a destination will give the area a USP that you can't get from either from the internet or from ordering stuff from abroad. So before, in fact, I'll go backwards. I'm going to stop sharing for now, and I'll go back to the meeting and really open it out, I think, to see whether there's any questions. I've got some more slides, so if there's particular things that crop up, we can always refer back to those.
And I'm going to just interject while people are mulling over some questions, just because a couple of weeks ago, Tina and I were both on a heritage panel together, and Tina made mention while we were on that panel of the physicality of the provision in terms of where people could work. So a developer comes along and has a plot of land and builds, I don't know, 10 apartments with a ground floor commercial unit on it. and they probably think that they are being really helpful because they're providing something that a local business could, you know, launch a business in, and they might even have a really reasonable rent attached to that unit. However, the point that Tina was making a few weeks ago, and I'll ask you in a minute, Tina, just to kind of expand on it a little bit, was that actually Tina doesn't want 5,000 square feet of commercial space. She just wants, she has a very specific need, and she'd really love to have a kind of frontage onto the street where she can display her wares and have a counter and serve people, but then have more space behind where it opens out into storage, etc. But she doesn't need vast amounts of space, and most of these developers have got a fairly inflexible process around, well, the size is what it is. If you don't, you know, maybe you all get together and you share the space, but it doesn't really work. So Tina, do you want to sort of broaden out a little bit into actually what would you like to see as a designer maker? Because hopefully that's the conversations we've taken and tried to build into this plan. So over to you, Tina. What's your ideal space look like?
Okay, well, when we was doing the talk, I talked about space as being more like an atelier space. So it's about representing exactly what we're doing. So, you know, you could have however many small shop fronts and that level of atelier. So say, like, for example, when you go to visit, say, Carlos, who is a tailor in the Jewellery Quarter, it's really fantastic that, you know, you can go in there and see what he's making, and then you're taken into a different room to talk about your own needs, or, you know, be measured up and things like that. So I think smaller spaces, but not a small space as in a hot desking feel, you know, where, you know, you've got a vast communal space and there's desks where people can come to, and, you know, a little kitchen or things like that. They're the things that we don't necessarily need, because a lot of makers, we're quite used to being on our own, and that's the reason why so that's the thing with quite a lot of us, is that's what we like doing it. We like to work on our own, but then we like to, you know, get involved with the community in different ways. So it's really great to be able to, it would be really great to be having something that is more a window, as Nicola was saying, a window, so that you can have it as a shop. And that is what is in the Jewellery Quarter at the moment, if we think about it, with, say, like, for example, say Stanley's or different jewelers, where they have got, you know, that was the sort of idea, wasn't it, about, you know, having like a frontage to sort of show your wares, and then you're still working in the background. So it's still a traditional model, but it's not as huge as, you know, some of the shop fronts that we're seeing in the Jewellery Quarter at the minute.
And that, I suppose, was provided for with the old Victorian buildings, because you almost had like a dog leg, didn't you, with kind of the light coming down behind, and providing light into those back rooms, but not making such a vast area out the front. So, okay. Laura, do you mind if I ask you what your area of creativity is? Oh, you're on mute, just in case you are talking. Sorry, Laura.
Okay. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, just a little bit broken up.
So I'm not necessarily creative. I'm a resident, so I'm just interested in what's happening in relation to, I love the fact that there's so many things going on in the Jewellery Quarter, and we do have these little businesses. So I'm just trying to understand how that works going forward.
Sure. Okay. Well, that helps. Do you live above something that has retail below it?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And is it used, or is it empty?
Currently used. It's currently a housing office.
Fine. Okay. That makes sense. So what we're trying to do as part of the plan is to create that activity along the major routes through the Jewellery Quarter. So I'm not sure whether you've had a chance to have a look through the information on the plan that's online, but it's definitely worth a look at. We have got a plain English version, and the plain English version, that is basically without all the planning phraseology or kind of what's the right word, just, you know, that special terminology that none of us actually understand unless we're planners. So actually that's definitely worth to have a look at. It's only 8 pages long, and it should give you some real clarity around how we're trying to develop the area in a way that works both for the businesses and for the residents. So I hope that helps. Matt, have you got any questions come through?
No, not yet. I think I can, in terms of addressing Tina's point earlier. I think the main message around that is around what planning. First of all, what planning can do, and what it can't do. So, planning gives opportunities to say that developers should provide commercial space, and you can drill down into different types of commercial space, so light industrial for the manufacturers, and then more general business space that would fit the bill for all sorts of designer makers. What we can also, and the neighbourhood plan does prescribe that within certain areas in the creative district that we're designated in the heart of the Jewellery Quarter, that no more than 50% of any development there, for example, can be residential. So it is increasing the supply of space, which tackles one of the things that were mentioned about rents or rates or the cost of having business premises. One thing that the Development Trust is pushed for in the recent A.E. Harris development and the consent there, which the developer in pre-application engagement was very happy to commit to, is the actual plans. It sounds stupid, but the plans of a building, you can, if the plans go in and show small units, and that becomes part of the consented scheme, then that secures it, because one of the issues that you get is that, as you were talking about earlier, you end up with large units that aren't good for designer makers or startup businesses or independents. They might be good for an engineering or an architecture firm that wants a big open plan space, or it might be good for a coffee shop chain, but it's not good for what makes this area special. So if you can get those kind of spaces in the plans that then get consented, then that's what has to be delivered. And what the neighbourhood plan does is, it makes provision for an increase in business space across the whole of the Jewellery Quarter, but in particular the creative district at the heart of it. And then it expects developers to provide a range of sizes, types and configurations of those spaces, and some of them are affordable rates, although the best way to make sure business space is affordable is by making sure that there's plentiful supply. What I would say is there's an opportunity here with the neighbourhood plan going through its consultation phases for creative industry bodies to get together and do almost like a white paper that says this is the kind of space that we need, so that when the neighbourhood plan comes into force, it can point people in the direction of this paper and say, look, developers, look, architects, if you're stuck for what does this actually mean, there's a report here from creative industries and designer makers and jewelers saying this is the kind of space we need, and then they can incorporate that in their developments. It gives them an easy way out, and tells them what they need to do.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, go on, Tina.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I think the other thing that I wanted to add on about with shopping, like with workshops around the back of a lot of the spaces in the jewellery quarter, that is shopping. You know, that is like, you know, when workshopping. So you'd be going from one shop to another to collect all of your different the different trays that have gone forward to make your earrings or whatever that is. And so a lot of people don't necessarily want to be found. So I think there's quite a lot of reticence, especially with jewellery, because whilst a lot of us as designer makers have probably got as much value in our workshops, it's not seen as that. But, you know, gold and silver is seen as something that you can quickly transfer. So quite a few makers and small jobbers that you would have spoken to, because I think it was really interesting to see where people really are. Because for many years, people have thought that people are in one place or another, but we now know where they all are. But some people will be quite uncomfortable about that, about being, you know, being in an area that is known to, you know, that there's lots of makers who have got high value to them, you know, components really. So again, it's about visibility for makers, but also respecting that some of us or some people don't necessarily want people to know where they are.
That's a really good point. What I'll do is I'll share my screen, but I'd encourage you and you know, I'll take that away. But if you can make that point by emailing that comment in,
Yeah.
Then you know, I'm sure other people will be saying something similar. And then when we take, because this is just the draft version of the plan, we take that away and we make modifications, and actually we can reinforce the point that provision of business space doesn't just mean street facing. It means some businesses absolutely do want to be hidden away in the rear shopping wings, or at the back of a courtyard, or on the first floor, tucked away where nobody knows they're there. If everyone can see the screen that I've got on now, the bit that that I mentioned earlier, this creative district, can you see that? Yeah. So what we did as part of the research for the neighbourhood plan, we surveyed identified all or pretty much all of the jewellery related businesses. It was specifically for jewellery, but jewellery and related supply chain, I should say, and really good engagement rate, and we identified where they were, but not in a, you know, this is a goldsmith and this is a diamond dealer, and made that public, but we identified where they were and plotted them, and that's what's been used to create the to draw up this creative district at the heart of the jewellery quarter, and then really around that, it's the planning policies have been developed so that any development that happens inside that creative district has to benefit the creative district. So that might be improving an ugly building and you know, making it fit better with its surroundings, but most of it is around providing good quality space, not necessarily expensive or high fancy. It's simple and robust, but providing the kind of space that creative businesses need within that creative district, reinforcing its identity, but providing new space as well as refurbished space, overall increasing the amount of space, which keeps rents under control, providing affordable workspace as well. So within that, it's no coincidence that a lot of that area is where all the old buildings are. So it should deliver on that need for, you know, having those tucked away premises in courtyards or in rear shopping wings.
Matt, so we've had a question through. I'm going to call you TC because TC, I don't have anything else to go by, I'm afraid, but it does say TC's Galaxy Tab. But TC has basically asked, you know, the huge unused space underneath New Hampton Lofts. So that is both a very good example of space that's far too large for the likes of the designer makers, but probably actually far too large for so many different kinds of businesses, because that in there is, God, that must be sort of 25,000 square feet. It's huge in there. It's also got a mezzanine. So so TC's basically asking is that what we're talking about, something being too large? I'd actually say that's probably even more large than we're generally speaking about. And you're absolutely right, it hasn't ever been used apart from some storage. The difficulty for us is that when the plan comes into effect, because I'm sure everybody will vote for it, when it comes into effect, it won't be retrospective. So there is no way of us saying, right, we can now backdate this and start applying it to things that already exist. But what it will do is prevent something like that New Hampton Lofts space happening in the future, because ultimately the plan is written in a way that says that that kind of space just would not get through planning, not unless there is an absolutely concrete use for it that's predetermined. So for example, if they said, actually, we're going to give this space to the community for a creative hub, now that would be a good reason to have such a large space that would be being given over to the community. Now, obviously, as we know, developers don't really gift space to the community. It's not really something they tend to do. And so instead, something like that amount of space being put forward in the planning proposal should now, and it's important that we emphasise, once this is through, it adds an awful lot of weight into the planning decision-making process. Matt sits on the actual planning consultation committee in the Jewellery Quarter, so he can probably elaborate on this a little bit more. But ultimately, if the plan gets through, a space like that should not exist and should not sit, nothing should sit there empty for that period of time. Hopefully, Matt, that makes sense and that's correct.
Yes, well, there's interesting reasons for that specific one. I'm not sure how much of this is a bit of hearsay and how much is true, but the one under New Hampton Lofts, one of the issues in terms of letting the space is its sheer size and it's not subdivided, whereas the Jewellery Quarter generally tends towards smaller spaces. There is a rumour that for some reason they're not the owner of the building overall is not paying business rates on those premises, so there's no incentive or disincentive for them to do anything with it. Now, in terms of the future success of the Jewellery Quarter, having a space like that on what will become a major thoroughfare at Great Hampton Street will be great, and I'm sure it will get snapped up. But absolutely, the first and foremost, any new space is open to scrutiny. The Jewellery Quarter Development Trust has the planning committee that I'm involved in, and we really challenge through pre-application as well as reviewing planning applications, really challenge what people's logic and rationale is and what the neighbourhood plan seeks to do. Ultimately, it's there. It's got to be pro-development by law, but what it seeks to do is to tell people this is how you get planning permission in the Jewellery Quarter. It's not saying, you know, not this and not that. It's not a NIMBY document. But what it does is it sets out what the community expects development to deliver for the Jewellery Quarter, and that's where we go back to the range of types and sizes. And within that creative district, there's certain expectations that it would deliver for the creative industries, but outside of that creative district, there's some space still has to be delivered for creative industry, but the other commercial space, it could be offices, it could be shops, it could be a car showroom or whatever, but it's still got a set of guiding principles and planning policies for those kinds of spaces. But at the same time, you can't overplan an area. You know, nothing was ever solved by planning in terms of allowing industries to evolve or allowing areas to change. It can give a bit of focus and it can set out priorities, but it shouldn't be for a planning document to tell Birmingham or the Jewellery Quarter what the next step in its evolution is.
Thanks, Matt. Has anybody else got any questions? We're very conscious of time, and obviously we didn't want to overlabour the point. Tina, how can I help?
I think I'm just sort of raising something that somebody has been speaking about we've talked about community quite a lot, and you know, I'm sort of more on the worker community side, but also on the resident side as well a little bit. And people have been asking about community spaces. So, you know, earlier on we said, oh, wouldn't it be great if underneath Lucas we could have that as a community space? But just thinking about whether planning can do anything like that to sort of say, look, you know, we are in need of a free workspace area or something like that. Is that something that planning can get involved with?
I shall defer this one to Matt.
Oh, I knew you would. So from the caution here is I'm not a planner. This is purely voluntary and for fun. The fun in inverted commas. So thinking on my feet a bit, what the neighbourhood plan can do is say that this is something that the community desires. What we can use the neighbourhood plan to do, a bit like the white paper that I mentioned earlier about the creative industries and creative businesses saying these are the kind of spaces that we like, then either through the development trust or the neighbourhood forum or whatever, we can set out a manifesto or a community shopping list. Some of this is already being delivered through the neighbourhood plan because we want outdoor space, we want more access to nature, things like that. But there are non-planning things that could be added into part 3 of the plan, or an additional kind of non-planning aspirations which give the whole picture. And so what that does is, whilst it doesn't make it an obligation to developers, what developers and anyone bringing any kind of scheme forward can do is say, well, actually, the community has said that they want this, and I'm going to deliver that, and in return, I would like a favour back. And that might be a relaxation of a rule in one aspect or another. But if it delivers on what the community wants, then that equips the planning officer who will use these documents to say, well, actually, this is good for the Jewellery Quarter overall.
Yeah, a little bit of a trade-off where perhaps there are, because we're all aware that there are some difficult areas of the Jewellery Quarter that you're asking people to fit into, and this is another part of the plan, is the design guide. But maybe there are some trade-offs where ultimately, without delivering something for the community, the planners will say, no, absolutely not. You haven't ticked all of these boxes that we need ticking. But it could come down to, actually, you haven't ticked this final box, but you're looking to deliver a vital piece of either infrastructure or greenery, perhaps a node. All of the things that we've almost put there as a bit of a wish list that say, actually, these are the elements we are prepared to do a little bit of a deal over, because actually we should appreciate, like Matt said, this is not a definitive, you can only do the following. It is, look, this is what the community wants. And though that wish list actually serves as a very useful trade-off area where viability of a particular plot might mean that they're not able to tick all of the boxes, but if they can add something extra into the district, then that would be fantastic, and we'll get something that we wouldn't normally have expected to get. So definitely. Laura, TC, does anybody else have any questions? Tom, how are you doing? Got any questions?
No, just really interesting to listen. Thank you.
very flattering. Lovely. Andy, I notice you're here. Have you got any questions? Not difficult ones, please. No, he's all good. Excellent. Lovely. Okay. Well,
So,
we are.
Can I just double check whether or not TC's question around B1 and B2 workspace was kind of covered earlier? It could be that I don't quite understand the question because I don't know about classing use.
Good question. I don't know my use classes particularly well at that end of the spectrum. Matt, it's my wonderful refer to you.
Use classes, if I recall, education falls under D, which is non-residential institutions. Now, in terms of workshops and things like that, I think a lot seem to be done under B, class B, which is business, so I guess it. As I say, I'm not a planner by trade, so I don't know how kind of strict the rules are for councils saying, well, no, you need to get a change of use because you've got students or whatever coming in. Because if it's only part of the time, then you'd say that it is some sort of business premises with visiting customers effectively. But there's nothing in terms of the planning rate. So the Jewellery Quarter neighbourhood plan is there to deliver commercial space, and there's a big focus on that. But then it sits in the wider city and national planning regime. And from what I've seen, looking at stuff happening in the Jewellery Quarter, actually switching from business space to education space is not a problem. Now, interestingly, if it's something that there is a clear desire for, then it is something that we can factor into the neighbourhood plan, because it's this is a draft, and this is what the engagement is about, is for people to say, hang on a second, don't forget about us, and this is what we need as well. So yeah, please do send that in as a comment using the form on the website or the email address, and we can have a look at it. And we do have proper planners in the group, so they'll be able to
yeah, they actually did a session
that
earlier, didn't they? So that probably would have been a good one for those guys. But thank you, TC. That's a very fair point. Touche. I would definitely really encourage everybody to go and have a look. I'm going to repaste this back into the group, which is go and have a look on the jewelleryquarter.net website. There's both the technical version and there is the plain English version. There is also the design guide, which essentially is it's called Designing the Jewellery Quarter. It's a supporting document, but it is absolutely part and parcel of the plan. So if we get to referendum and we are voted through as a yes, then these documents will become law. They will become planning policy that the planners have to abide by. And like we said earlier, they carry a great deal of weight. And it's important that I've said this on previous workshops, but I will repeat to myself again. The council have been really supportive and really on board with this whole process. It doesn't mean they've always agreed with the direction we've taken, but it does mean that they understand the direction and the reasons why, and they are supportive in terms of they've helped us to make sure we're phrasing things in a way that means they can then apply them and actually hold people accountable. So it's definitely worth the read through. If you don't like the deeply technical stuff, the plain English version is really useful because it really does explain why and what we're trying to achieve with each individual policy. So in light of the fact that we've all got a Boris Johnson talk to go and listen to in 15 minutes. And I know you're all very excited about that. I'm going to bring this to a close. I'm going to say a huge thank you to everybody. I really appreciate the fact that you've all logged in late on a Tuesday evening. Please do enjoy whatever Boris has got to say to us. And I hope you're all okay with whatever the output of that is. Thank you again. Please do make sure that you go and read through the documents, and please give us your feedback. If you feedback, we must consider it. If you don't feedback, we'll never know about it. So please do fill out the feedback. It can be very short, and it can be incredibly long. We're really fine with it either way. The next part of the process for us will be going through all of that feedback. Then we're going to be making some amends if there are particular points that we think really should be incorporated or tweaks that need to be made. Then we'll be submitting that through to Birmingham City Council, and they will appoint an examiner who will examine it and potentially make some more tweaks, or I'm imagining that our document by that point will be so perfect they won't need to. And then eventually we go out to what's called Regulation 16, which is the final check with everybody to highlight what's going on in the plan. And then we'll go to referendum, which, as things stand, all referendums are off until next May. So we're going to have a lot of fun trying to keep everybody engaged between now and next May, but then we'll be hounding you all again to go and vote yes. And there'll be 2 referendums, one for businesses and one for the residents. And we need a yes on both of those. So we will really ramp up the activity as we get closer to that referendum. But I hope that's really explained it for everybody. If you do have any questions, we are contactable through Facebook. I think we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. You can get hold of us definitely. So please feel free to come back to us, read it, feedback on it, and vote yes. Excellent. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a lovely evening, and we'll see you again soon. See you later.